Hi there, it's Stuart Fenster. I'm the couples expert, and welcome to another edition of the Couples Expert podcast. Today I'm going to be having on my show a friend of mine, Risa Ganel. Risa is a wonderful therapist on the East Coast, and she deals with a specialty that's pretty interesting, which is the combination of taking your physical health and how do you have and recognize the importance of what your physical health is impacts the relationships in your life and how to fit the two together. And I'm excited to be talking all about that with her today. She's a graduate at University of Maryland at College Park with a master's degree in marriage and family therapy. And by the way, that's the same school that I got my degree in, at least my undergraduate degree. She is a daughter of entrepreneurial parents, which is sort of interesting because as you work in this field, what you understand is that so much of our work has to do with really sending our message out there. And if you don't understand how to do that well, so having a parent that does do that, and her dad, I guess, is an accountant and mother's a teacher. Also, this is sort of interesting about Risa that I learned recently, is that she runs marathons and is also a fitness enthusiast. And she's actually completed the Marine Corps Marathon 4 times, the Disney Marathon, and a bunch of half marathons. So I'm just tired just even mentioning it. She also is a training mentor for Leukemia and Lymphoma Society and is dedicated to helping put an end to blood cancer, and she's raised over $10,000 for that society, which shows her dedication. It also gives you a feel of who she is as a person, how giving she is, and that's been my experience with Risa. So I am so excited to talk about this combination of physical and psychological health when it comes to relationships with her today. So Risa, welcome to the Couples Expert.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on your show, Stuart. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this topic because it's been an area of interest of mine. But what I usually like to start with is just asking people a bit about their background and what prompted you to get into this crazy field of relationship counseling.
Oh, sure.
It is a crazy field, as you know.
It is a crazy field and one that keeps me on my toes. I got into marriage and family therapy because when I was studying psychology in my undergraduate program on Long Island at Hofstra University, I really found that something was missing when I was studying psychology. It was all focused on the individual. And as I said, something was really missing for me, and I learned about marriage at that program and then went on to figure out, well, where do they teach that? And I have to be a part of that, and discovered the University of Maryland at College Park and went from there. What was missing for me was the fact that we are always in relation to other people, and we are significantly affected by what others do, what others don't do, how we feel in those relationships. Our relationships from our past affect our present relationships. And so once I learned about marriage and family therapy, I knew that that was the key for me to really help as many people as possible.
Did you have any life experiences that sort of said to you, this is something that I'm really passionate about, or was it more from an intellectual sort of the knowledge that you gained from knowing those things?
Sure, I think it's a bit of both. It was certainly the intellectual. However, when I was a child, I went to sleepaway camp, and I vividly remember writing a note home to my parents just in shock that I was the only one in my bunk of 10 or 12 girls whose parents were still together. The rest of my bunkmates, their parents were divorced. And that was very new to me. That was something I did not encounter with our friendships, like the friends that I had when I was growing up, but when I went away to camp and met a bunch of people who were from other cities and other towns, this really struck me. And I think that stuck with me for a very long time and is part of the reason that I went into couples counseling in particular.
I think a lot of us do that for those types of things. Either that you come from a background that is secure and you feel like, oh my gosh, I was very lucky, or you come from, as I do, from parents who were divorced and recognizing the pain that comes with that. So, or
Absolutely.
not wanting people to experience that kind of pain.
Right. And I will say, though I came from that stable background, my parents were married for decades until my mother passed in 2010. However, I myself have been through a divorce. My first marriage ended in divorce when my daughter was 2 years old. So I'd like to say that I have both experiences. I grew up with that stability, but my first marriage did end in divorce. And so I certainly understand firsthand the experience of that, the pain of that, and the healing that can come from that.
And what's so interesting about that statement is, just because you have a secure family background doesn't mean that your relationships automatically are going to work, that there are things that we all need to do to make sure that that happens and not just sit back and say, well, I'm safe because I don't have to worry about that because my
That's
parents
right.
were together for so long. And it really leads us to saying, there are certain things that are necessary in order to have a relationship that is secure and one that's going to last your whole life, which is what we all look for.
That's right.
Now, putting all of this together, how did that then shift for you in terms of your interest in the physical health?
Sure. So I became involved in physical health when my mother was diagnosed with blood cancer. Now, as a kid, well, I never considered myself an athlete as a kid, although I was a competitive roller skater. I will say that. It was the 70s, and that's what we did. And I had all the cute little dresses and pom poms on my skates and practiced
And
every
staying
day.
alive was in the background always. When you were
That's right. Staying alive, Michael Jackson, all
That's
that
right.
good stuff. And I competed and I won medals and stuff, but I never thought of
Wow.
myself as an athlete. I did that until I was about 12 years old.
Mhm.
So fast forward to 2008 or 9, it was when my mother was diagnosed with blood cancer. And that got me involved in a program called Team in Training, which is an arm of the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society that trains people to run half marathons, full marathons, or cycle century rides, so 100-mile bike rides, and so on. And I was really just at a loss for how to help my mother and what to do. She lived in another state. And so I became involved with that program in order to raise funds for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. I'd never run a mile in my life. And they trained me to run my first half marathon, and I've just been running ever since.
Wow, that's pretty neat. I never knew that there was something like that because I've tried to do some half marathons myself. And, it's nice to have someone who can really train you. And this is an entire organization that's dedicated to helping people do that.
That's right. They have amazing coaches. And so, whether you are just starting out for the first time and want to do it, or you're a seasoned runner, it's a wonderful way to get connected to a community with a mission that's larger than yourself and to help yourself get into better physical shape as well through running.
And for those of you that are listening today, one of the things we'll do is in my show notes for this episode, we'll put a link to that. So if anyone's interested in getting in touch with them, that's how you could do it. So here you are, you're learning to run, you're beginning to do marathons. How did you then incorporate the two?
I really began to recognize that a lot of the couples that I work with were also struggling with their own physical health. Many of them were certainly overweight and struggling with that. Others just not having the energy. Many struggling with depression and anxiety. And I really began to realize and learn about how the two are so directly connected that when you're struggling with anxiety or depression, obviously that's going to affect your relationship. Some of it we can look at and say it's caused by distress in your relationship, but some of it often is not as direct a correlation, but people have different tendencies towards those struggles, depression and anxiety. And when you can get those under control, managed better, then it also helps improve your relationship. And we know that exercise is directly correlated with improving anxiety and depression. In fact, it's really been shown, there are many studies that show that physical activity is approximately equal in effect to antidepressants and anxiety medications.
I'm really thrilled to hear you say that, because one of the things that I've done with a lot of the folks in my office who come in, whether they're coping with a breakup or going through a divorce, or they're just really depressed about what's happening, is I tell them to get on a stationary bike, because the endorphins that come with that are very similar to what happens when they are on an antidepressant.
Absolutely. It's one of the most underutilized antidepressants out there. And I'm not against medication. It's just that there are lifestyle changes that we can make that will significantly reduce the symptoms of depression and anxiety, which will in turn help our relationships. Because I can tell you, I know that when I'm stressed and anxious and I don't get my run in for the day or my workout for the day, I'm grumpier, I'm crabbier towards my husband, towards my kids. And I know on those days, it's like, oh, I didn't get it in today. And so now I see why I'm snapping at them more than I normally would.
It's almost like meditation, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Because I tell people all the time, if you're dealing with the triggers that sometimes comes up in relationships, if you're sort of not mentally sort of feeling that calmness, how you handle the triggers makes such a difference. Does that play itself out also with the exercise?
Yes, it does. And I'm not talking about extended, long um, hours of exercise, right? If anything, these long training runs that I do when I'm training for a marathon are not helpful for this. There's a balance, there's a tipping point. And really, it's just 30 to 60 minutes a day of activity is what most people need to reduce the anxiety and depression.
Are there particular kinds of exercises that you recommend with that? Are these have to be sort of aerobic, or are there just
I
walking,
recommend,
or what?
yeah, I recommend, it sort of depends on where you're starting, right? If you're starting from zero, I recommend that you get up and walk for X amount of time. If 5 minutes is where you're at, then that's where you're at. And you'll get to 6 minutes next, and you'll get to 7 minutes next. But if your job perhaps is a little bit more active, I say that because so many of us have very sedentary jobs, like us, Stuart, you sit in a
Yes.
chair all day,
Right.
right? That if your job is more sedentary, you may need to start out at a certain level. And if your job is more active, you may be able to start out at a higher level. But building your way up to walking for 30 minutes, right? And certainly aerobic exercise is important and helpful, but I also encourage people to do weightlifting because weightlifting builds muscle, which burns fat. Muscle is an active tissue, which increases your metabolism throughout the day, right? Because muscle tissue, when at rest, burns more calories than fat tissue when at rest. So you're going to see physical changes in your body that you may be looking for, whether it's to fit into those pair of jeans or to reduce your waist size, because we know how highly correlated that is with heart disease. And so it's for all different kinds of reasons.
Are there particular, when we talk about weightlifting, and I don't want to have this be a exercise podcast,
Right,
but are
right.
there particular exercises with the weightlifting that you recommend for those folks, let's say, who aren't totally new because I think most people who are sort of at that zero, as you were mentioning, probably aren't going to be ready for the weightlifting right now. But for those that maybe have been walking or doing things like that, what do you recommend in terms of the weightlifting?
Well, I would say it a little differently, actually.
Okay.
I think people who are starting out, even just with, just coming off the couch, so to speak, that they can do weightlifting too, because it's not about lifting heavy weights all the time.
Okay.
It's simply about creating resistance, which you can do with your own body weight. So, as strange as it sounds, squats is a type of weightlifting because you are raising and lowering your own body weight. So, you don't need any equipment, but you can do squats, and that will help you with building muscle. You can do lunges, that will help you with building muscle. For upper body, you may want to do something where you are you can even do it where you're not lifting anything, but imagine if you have your arms at your sides and you're raising your arms up and down at the side of your body over your head, up and down. Eventually, you'd add weights to that. You'd add 3 pounds, or you'd add, a few tin cans, cans of vegetables or something, just so that you have a little bit more resistance. For someone starting out, doing that will increase muscle mass as well.
I'm glad you corrected me because it sounds like it's so simple, but people make it much more difficult in their head when it comes to doing this.
They do. They make it much more difficult, and they think it takes much more time. There are high-intensity interval workouts called HIIT workouts
Would you
that
spell
are...
that?
Sure, it's HIIT as in Tom.
Okay.
HIIT, high-intensity interval training.
Okay.
And you can do that in as little as 7 minutes. I'll give you an example. There's a wonderful free app called the 7-Minute Workout, and it will guide you through 7 minutes of about 7 different exercises. It's one a minute. That is a HIIT workout. So you're getting your cardio, your heart rate up in short bursts, bringing it back down, and then bringing it back up again, and bringing it back down. You can start with something like that.
So it's really doing intervals is really what you're recommending.
Yeah, that's a really good way to increase your metabolism, burn calories quickly, and keep your metabolism going even after you've finished the workout throughout the rest of the day.
That's great. Now, let's sort of bring this back to the relationship. So you're doing these things. What is the correlation as you see it? Is it just about me individually being less stressed, so I react differently to my partner, or is there more of a correlation between the connection between two people?
Yeah, I think it's both. And I always look for and rather than either or. It helps you individually and at the same time helps relationships, because when you are taking care of yourself physically, you are more confident, you are stronger emotionally, and you bring that to your relationship. So you're bringing your best self to the relationship. Now, from that, hopefully, what it will also do is inspire your partner to take care of themselves, to motivate them to do things differently, to get more involved in physical activity so that they're healthier, and so on. I really like to think of it like a child's mobile hanging over a crib, that when one piece moves, the others have no choice but to move in relation to that piece. So, for example, I got involved in running, and my husband said, "Wow, I'm so amazed at what you've accomplished and the dedication you've shown and what you've done." And of course, he supported me all along the way, which is very important, that we are supportive of our partners, even when we're not doing it ourselves. But in this case, he was inspired to do century rides. And so he started cycling and biking 100-mile races. So I moved, right? Like that mobile over the crib, and he moved in relation to it.
I love the analogy about the mobile. If you think of it, because it really is sort of the yin and the yang in terms of what I do impacts my partner and what my partner does impacts me. And it's sort of the chicken or the egg, as we were talking a little bit earlier. And one of the things that I teach in my office, it's the perception we have of our partners impacts so much how we see the relationship. And if your partner is doing these physical activities, and if it's overtly stated as well as in action, that part of why we do these things is because I want to look the best for you. I want to be healthy so I can be around, so we can live a long life together. Our partner begins to see us as, wow, I matter to you. Now I'm going to do the same. And now we have two people doing that, both sending a very clear message that my love for you has me doing things that make me better physically, mentally, and in all ways.
That's right.
It's such a wonderful way of really getting couples to a place where they say, we matter to one another.
Yes.
How do you then take that in the office, perhaps, and then use that in terms of your counseling?
Well, people come to me primarily for couples counseling, but it's very rare that they come to me just for that and don't have other things that they're struggling with. And often the other things they're struggling with are somewhere in the physical realm, right? And so I really try and take a holistic approach and let people know that, we want you to further the work that we do in session, outside of session. And some of that may mean doing the homework that I give you together as a couple, but some of it may mean, like you said, getting on the stationary bike, going for a walk, doing physical exercise in order to get those endorphins going and in order to work on that aspect of life. Now, I will say that one of the things that often trips couples up in this realm is they get frustrated if the other isn't doing what they're doing or supporting what they're doing. And so it's really important to balance what you're doing for yourself, what your expectations are of the other person, and really remembering that you're coming at this as a team, that one of you may start to exercise and have the hope that the other will as well. But always remember that each of you are sovereign individuals,
Right.
right? And just because, your friend's husband got into it doesn't mean yours will too. We hope so. But it's not a foregone conclusion, and it shouldn't make or break things. You keep doing what you're doing because you're taking care of yourself.
I think the saddest thing for me is when I have a couple in my office where this issue comes up. And sometimes where it goes is into the area of attraction in terms of their sexual relationship,
Yes.
whether there's a desire for their partner. And then we have the other piece that also fits with this, I think, is people begin to see your love for me is only dependent on what I look on the outside.
Right.
And how do you put all of that together for a couple in your work with them?
Yeah, it's very individualized and really is depending on the specific issues that couple is struggling with. I always try and send the message that physical exercise is not primarily about how you look, and helping people with that, because society certainly sends us a very different message.
Right.
And so helping them explore what that's about for them and what that's about, the meaning that they put on their partner.
And I think one of the things that comes with that is the whole concept, and I think the way that I like to frame it for people, because what it more often than not is about health. It's about the fear of losing someone, and can I really know that I'm going to give my love to this person and they're going to do all the things necessary to help them be around?
That's right.
And so that can be real scary for people.
Yes, it can. Especially, I've experienced with certain couples, especially when someone has a parent who died at a young age, and now they're approaching that age, or their spouses.
One of the things that before we finish, and I really appreciate all the insight and the tips and all the suggestions. One of the things I want to make sure people know is that I brought you on for a couple of reasons. One, because I wanted to talk about this, but the other is to talk about with a fellow podcaster that you now have a podcast, don't you?
I do. Thank you. Yes.
Tell my audience a little bit about your podcast and what the focus is and how they could find you.
My podcast is called Stronger Together with Risa Ganel. And the best way to find that is through my website, togethercouplescounseling.com/podcast.
Okay, terrific. When can they find new episodes?
Yeah, it's weekly and it releases on Thursdays.
That's great. And, Risa, it's been so much fun sort of talking about this because, you and I met online and have become friends. And I really appreciate just how much you give back because you do that quite a bit. And I want to just thank you for the time that you've spent here today. And I guess before we go, what I like to ask my guests for the last question is a little bit about your work, both working in the field of physical health as well as in mental health and couples counseling in particular. What are some of the things that you learned about yourself that surprised you?
Oh, wow. Let's see. So many things. That might be hard to pick one.
Well, it doesn't have to just be one, but just sort of really more about are there things about your work that's been meaningful or things that have been really helpful for you personally?
I am truly honored every time a couple comes through my door and shares their experiences with me and allows me to walk beside them during some of the darkest times of their lives. People who seek couples counseling are often really struggling and in a lot of pain. And that they put their trust in me means more to me than I could ever express. I always have their best interest at heart and seek to help wherever possible. And I think what I've learned about myself is that we're just all in this together. That I've certainly had my own struggles, that no one is above anybody else.
And for me, I hear that very loud and clear in you, and it's an honor to also to share that sort of vision. And I think for me, whenever I ask that question, always comes up my own, thoughts about that. And I think in what you're saying is this as well, which is not only being honored that people come in and share themselves and bring us into their world, but this world can be a really lonely place sometimes. And if we can help people really find just that one person and help them really walk out of our doors knowing that they're not alone and that we're there and their partner's there, that's a beautiful experience.
Yes, it truly is.
And thank you again for joining me today. I really appreciate everything that you've shared. And to all of you out there, thank you once again for listening. And one of the things I'm excited to share is that we're now we're working toward our 100th episode. And thank you, all of you, for being here through all of that. And we'll see you all next time. Take care and stay connected. Bye-bye.